Welcome back to the Echo Classroom. Today we're discussing one of the most overlooked portions of the echocardiographic examination, the pulmonic valve and the right ventricular outflow tract. Many sonographers spend a great deal of time evaluating the mitral valve and the aortic valve, but when we get to the pulmonic valve, it's often a quick image, a quick color Doppler, and then we move on to the next view. The reality is that the small portion of the examination can tell us a tremendous amount about pulmonary pressures, pulmonary vascular resistance, right ventricular function, stroke volume, and even underlying pathology that might otherwise be missed. Today, I want to show you how I approach the pulmonic valve examination and why some of the most valuable information in echocardiography can come from a single RVOT Doppler tracing. Here's the roadmap we'll be following throughout today's lesson. Don't worry about memorizing everything right now. Instead, think of this page as a bird's eye view of the pulmonic valve examination. By the end of today's lesson, every item on this page should make sense. The page you're looking at now outlines the step-by-step approach we'll use to evaluate the pulmonic valve and the RVOT. As we move through it, focus on what each image is showing us, what each Doppler tracing is telling us, and what question each measurement is helping us answer. Because in echocardiography, every image, every waveform, and every measurement should have a purpose. One question. What is the most underutilized Doppler waveform in echocardiography? Many sonographers would answer the RVOT pulse wave Doppler tracing, and I would agree. From a single waveform, we can evaluate pulmonary acceleration time, RVOT VTI, stroke volume, pulmonary vascular resistance, and clues to pulmonary hypertension. That is an incredible amount of information from one tracing. So let's begin there. Pulmonary acceleration time, sometimes called PAAT or PVAT, measures the interval from the onset of systolic flow to peak velocity. To obtain it, use pulse wave Doppler, place the sample volume within the RVOT, position it just proximal to the pulmonic valve, measure from the beginning of flow to peak velocity. Simple measurement, powerful information. While we're here, let's look at one of the ASC's measurements obtained from this view. Remember, measurements are most valuable when we understand where they come from and what they are telling us. Why does PAAT matter? As pulmonary artery pressure rises, blood accelerates more rapidly through the RVOT. The peak occurs earlier. The acceleration time becomes shorter. The waveform becomes increasingly triangular. This makes PAAT one of our most useful clues to pulmonary hypertension. Classroom insight. One of the hallmarks of an experienced sonographer is pattern recognition. Before measuring anything, simply look at the waveform. A broad, rounded waveform is generally reassuring. A sharply peaked triangular waveform should immediately attract your attention. Many times, your eyes recognizes the abnormality before your calipers confirm it. PAAT reference values. Normal acceleration time is generally greater than 120 milliseconds. As pulmonary pressures rise, acceleration time shortens. Values below 100 milliseconds become increasingly concerning. Values below 80 milliseconds are often seen in severe pulmonary hypertension. Mid-systolic notching. As pulmonary vascular resistance increases, reflected pressure waves interrupt forward flow. This creates a notch within the Doppler envelope. When you see shortened PAAT, triangular waveform, mid-systolic notching, pulmonary hypertension should immediately come to mind. Classroom insight. Train your eyes before your calipers. Mid-systolic notching is one of those findings that often catches your eye before you ever perform a measurement. Develop the habit of recognizing patterns first. Measurements confirm what you're already seeing. RVOT VTI obtained from the RVOT pulse wave Doppler. The same waveform used for PAAT also provides RVOT VTI. After tracing the systolic envelope, we can estimate the distance blood travels through the RVOT during systole. This becomes valuable when evaluating stroke volume and pulmonary blood flow. Why RVOT-VTI matters. RVOT-VTI provides physiologic information about forward flow. The measurement itself is useful. Understanding what it represents is even more useful. Always interpret the value in the context of the patient's clinical picture. Stroke volume. This is calculated by having the RVOT area multiplied by the RVOT-VTI. When RVOT diameter and RVOT-VTI are known, stroke volume can be calculated. This becomes particularly useful when evaluating congenital heart disease and pulmonary blood flow. Now that we've discussed Doppler measurements, let's discuss the views that make those measurements possible: the RVOT long axis view and the RVOT short axis view. The first view we'll cover is the RVOT long axis view. Up to this point, we've focused on the information the RVOT can provide. Now let's take a step back and discuss the view that makes many of those measurements possible. This is the RVOT long axis view. The RVOT long axis view is one of the most important pulmonic valve views. This is where we evaluate anatomy and obtain the proximal RVOT measurement. The proximal RVOT measurement should be obtained during end diastole in either long or short axis. Personally, for me, both of these measurements are more accurate when measured in the peristernal short axis view. An enlarged RVOT may be associated with pulmonary hypertension, pulmonic regurgitation, RV volume overload, congenital heart disease, or left to right shunts. Classroom insight. One of the most common reasons for inaccurate RVOT measurements is obtaining an off-axis image. Always confirm that you are imaging the true outflow tract before placing calipers. For me, the RVOT short axis view complements the long axis. This is my favorite view for evaluating the pulmonic valve because it allows us to assess both anatomy and Doppler information from a single window. From this view, there are 4 measurements I routinely think about: pulmonic acceleration time, RVOT-VTI, pulmonic valve VTI, and PRN diastolic velocity when present. Notice how all 4 measurements are grouped together. That's because they're helping us answer different parts of the same question: what is happening within the RVOT, the pulmonic valve, and pulmonary circulation. Take a look at figure 5.12. This is our pulmonic acceleration time measurement. Remember from earlier in the lecture that PAAT is one of the most useful and underutilized measurements in echocardiography. A normal waveform has smooth, rounded appearance and a longer acceleration time. As pulmonary pressure rises, the peak velocity occurs earlier and the acceleration time becomes shorter. Before you ever place calipers, train your eyes to recognize the waveform pattern. Now, take a look at figure 5.13. This is the RVOT-VTI. This measurement tells us how far blood travels through the RVOT during systole. Think of it as a stroke distance measurement. When combined with area, it helps us understand right ventricular forward output. The important thing to remember is that VTI is more than a number. It provides insight into flow and overall right-sided hemodynamics. Now, let's take a look at figure 5.14. This tracing demonstrates pulmonic valve VTI. Here, we're evaluating flow across the pulmonic valve itself. If elevated velocities are suspected or if pulmonic stenosis becomes a concern, continuous wave Doppler can provide additional information regarding gradients and peak velocities. And if pulmonic regurgitation is present, the same examination may also provide valuable information regarding pulmonary pressures through PR velocity measurements. Classroom insight. One thing I want you to notice is that all 3 of these Doppler tracings originate from the same view. That's why obtaining and optimizing this window is so important. A single RVOT short axis acquisition can provide information regarding pulmonary pressures, stroke volume, pulmonic stenosis, pulmonic regurgitation, and right ventricular hemodynamics. That's exactly why this view deserves more attention than the quick image and move on approach it sometimes receives. The distal RVOT measurement is obtained from the short axis view. An enlarged distal RVOT may suggest elevated pulmonary pressures or right-sided volume overload. Now let's talk about pulmonic stenosis. This patient does not have pulmonic stenosis. However, when pulmonic stenosis is suspected, you should obtain continuous wave Doppler through the pulmonic valve. As obstruction increases, velocity increases. Color Doppler often demonstrates turbulent flow whenever this is the case. Pulmonic valve Vmax. Let's return to our measurement reference page for a moment. One of the values included within the pulmonic valve protocol is pulmonic valve Vmax. Understanding this measurement helps us recognize increasing obstruction across the valve. Pulmonic valve Vmax is one of the measurements included within the pulmonic valve protocol. Always assess peak velocity when stenosis is suspected. Pulmonic regurgitation. So far, we've focused primarily on forward flow. Now let's discuss what happens when blood moves in the opposite direction. This brings us to pulmonic regurgitation. Just like other valve lesions, pulmonic regurgitation should be assessed using multiple findings, not a single measurement. Mild pulmonic regurgitation, what it looks like. Thin, narrow color Doppler jet. The jet remains close to the pulmonic valve. You'll find short jet length into the RVOT. Faint continuous wave Doppler signal, PR velocity typically low. What the RV looks like. The RV size is usually normal, no evidence of volume overload. Now here's a classroom insight for you. Trace to mild PR is extremely common and is often considered a normal physiologic finding. Moderate pulmonic regurgitation, what it looks like. Wider collar jet extends deeper into the RVOT, denser continuous wave Doppler envelope. Increased diastolic flow reversal. The RV may begin showing mild enlargement. Findings should be correlated with RV size and function. Classroom insight. At this stage, don't focus only on the valve. Start looking at how the right ventricle is responding. Severe pulmonic regurgitation. What it looks like. Large, broad color jet. The jet fills a substantial portion of the RVOT. You'll find dense continuous wave Doppler signal, steep deceleration slope, early equalization of the pulmonary artery and RV diastolic pressures. So what would the RV look like? Well, generally, RV enlargement is often present. Signs of chronic right-sided volume overload may also be seen. What I want you to remember, when assessing pulmonic regurgitation, ask yourself 3 questions. How large is the collar Doppler jet? What does the continuous wave Doppler signal look like? And how is the right ventricle responding? Because the severity of pulmonic regurgitation is not determined by the jet size alone. It is determined by the story the valve and the right ventricle are telling together. PR velocity. One of the most overlooked measurements in the pulmonic valve examination is PR velocity. Yet, the single Doppler signal can provide valuable information regarding both pulmonic regurgitation and pulmonary hemodynamics. The peak PR velocity reflects the pressure difference between the pulmonary artery and the right ventricle during diastole and can offer clues about elevated pulmonary pressures. As the regurgitant jet continues towards the end of diastole, the PRN diastolic velocity, or PRN Vmax, represents the pressure gradient that remains just before the pulmonic valve closes. In simple terms, it gives us a snapshot of what the pulmonary artery pressure looks like at the end of filling. When combined with right atrial pressure, this measurement can help estimate pulmonary artery end diastolic pressure, or PAEDP, and provide additional insight to pulmonary hemodynamics. Like every Doppler measurement, PR velocity should never be interpreted in isolation. Always integrate it with the patient's clinical picture, right ventricular findings, tricuspid regurgitation data, and the remainder of the echocardiographic examination. Classroom insight. Think of PR velocity as telling you about the pressure difference in early diastole, while PRN Vmax tells you what pressure remains in the pulmonary artery just before the next heartbeat begins. Together, they help complete the story of right-sided pressures. Now, let's talk about the 60-60 sign. The 60-60 sign combines 2 findings: a pulmonary acceleration time less than 60 milliseconds and a tricuspid regurgitant gradient less than 60 millimeters of mercury. At first glance, this may seem confusing. If pulmonary pressures are elevated, wouldn't we expect TR gradient to be very high? The answer is not always. The key word here is acute. In chronic pulmonary hypertension, the right ventricle has had months or even years to adapt. Over time, it develops the ability to generate significantly elevated pressures. But in acute pulmonary embolism, the situation is very different. The obstruction occurs suddenly. Pulmonary vascular resistance rises abruptly. The RV immediately encounters a large increase in afterload, and one of the first things we see is a markedly shortened pulmonary acceleration time. However, the right ventricle has not had time to remodel or generate the extremely high pressure often seen in chronic disease. As a result, the TR gradient may remain below 60 millimeters despite significantly acute right ventricular strain. This creates the classic 60-60 pattern. One classroom insight for you. Think of the 60-60 sign as the heart telling you resistance has suddenly increased, but the right ventricle hasn't had time to adapt. That's why the finding is more suggestive of an acute pressure overload than chronic pulmonary hypertension. I need you to remember this. The 60-60 sign is not diagnostic of pulmonary embolism. It is simply one clue among many. Always integrate this finding with the rest of the examination. Ask yourself, is the RV enlarged? Is there septal flattening? Is there evidence of RV dysfunction? Is the PAAT shortened? And is there mid-systolic notching? The strongest sonographers rarely make assumptions from a single measurement. You should always try to recognize patterns and then putting the story together. And that is exactly what the 60-60 sign helps us achieve. Now let's return to the roadmap we started with. At the beginning of today's lesson, this may have looked like a collection of images that you had to capture for the protocol and measurements you needed. But now, hopefully you can see that every image, every waveform, and every measurement serves a purpose. Together, they help us understand the pulmonic valve and the story the RVOT is trying to tell. This is the most important slide in today's lecture. Our goal is not simply to collect measurements. Our goal is to answer questions. Every image, every Doppler tracing, and every measurement should help us better understand the patient's physiology. Now here's a classroom challenge for you. Before moving on, challenge yourself to identify each of these findings without looking at your notes. If you can recognize these concepts consistently, you're well on your way to mastering the pulmonic valve examination and becoming an outstanding sonographer. Final takeaway. The pulmonic valve is far more than a quick color Doppler clip. A complete pulmonic valve examination provides valuable information regarding pulmonary pressures, pulmonary vascular resistance, stroke volume, right ventricular function, and valve pathology. Master the views, master the measurements, and you'll dramatically improve your scanning, confidence, and your understanding of right-sided heart disease. The concepts discussed in today's lecture are based upon ASC guideline recommendations, established echocardiography references, and the protocol-based approach presented through the roadmap to cardiac ultrasound. As always, clinical judgment should be used when applying any measurement or guidance to patient care. Thank you for being part of the Echo Classroom, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.